Hello and welcome to EduMate.tv. I'm Chetan Sharma. We learn to live and live to learn in what has turned out to be an unprecedented situation, an unprecedented pandemic, with history being written across the geography of Mother Earth. And a minor virus has created a major catastrophe, making each and every one of us rewind, rethink, reboot, re-strategize, restructure, reformat before we rebuild a new normal, a new life. In the world of higher education, particularly, the two facets which are critical to enable us to encounter the challenges, find creative solutions, and more importantly, create opportunities, are one which stems from the past experience, past knowledge. And the second facet would be the future, pliability, embracing it, evolving with it, and anticipating it. And to do both of those with one mind makes a very wise chancellor. And we have a very wise one with us today. It's a great pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Alok Pandey of the IMS in Ghaziabad. Thank you, sir, for joining us. These have been trying times, to say but the least. Tell us how you, as a leader, have led your flock from March 2020.
First of all, thank you very much, Mr. Chetan Sharma. These are difficult times, and when we interact with wise people like you, they help us live these times a little better. So last 6 months have been very difficult, of course, since March 22nd when the lockdown was. In fact, things were turning out to be a little awry since February only, when people were a little unhappy about the pandemic and when this would strike us. And it finally struck, not as a pandemic, but as a lockdown. Finally, our institute was in the midst of its session. We had our classes going on. We had all the situations, all the examinations, all the things which were left. So what really happened was that through my colleagues, I was able to find a solution. And this is called hybrid learning. In fact, last 1 year or so, I've made some changes in the institutions. Some of them are like having a learning management system supported by an ERP-based online examination system. And that stood with us during these periods. Of course, a high-end connectivity with good quality systems available with our faculty members personally at their residences. It also helped. So we started online teaching, we did online examinations, both end-term and mid-term. We were able to get all these final research projects of our students done because, I had in last 1 year converted my entire library into an online system. In fact, I spent around, I believe, close to 70 to 80 lakh rupees only on library itself in last 1 year, in terms of getting those softwares and getting all the databases and journals, etc. And this really was a learning experience. Say by April, we were able to finish with our examination, with our research projects. We were able to let our students go and join the second years. We were able to let the first year, which was going into second year, start their summer internship projects. Of course, AICTE was of a great help, where they said that the students can actually go ahead and start working on the online-based training programs. So these 6 months, in fact, once we rejoined, the faculty started, they continued with their programs. I requested them to organize faculty development programs for different institutions. And I got a wonderful support. We've got close to 50 strong faculty. Till date, we have done approximately 12 faculty development programs, 40 webinars. Out of those 12 faculty programs, every program had, barring a few, every had around 70 to 80, up to 100 attendance. And we trained around 1,000 teachers across the country. And that gives me a sense of pride. Not just we were able to take the best out of, what you call adverse condition, but we were able to convert it into an advantage for us. If you look at the social media profile of the institute, what I came to know from my marketing faculty members when they came to me, and that was a happy moment, and my students also, they said, sir, we are the only institution which is doing so much of work. And we've got huge social media presence. So I told them that social media presence is often about the quantity of work you do. It cannot be a fake media presence. Social media is much stronger. People are able to find out as to what you're doing and what you are not. So my faculty colleagues have been with me. My students have been with me. And these, despite being trying times, have become great times for all of us. And I have really enjoyed these 6 months identifying the new medium.
They say that the leadership is all about anticipation. And it's quite remarkable the way you have anticipated. It almost, seems like you were expecting something like COVID because of the way that you were able to, build your LMS, to be able to build your library, which is so critical at a time when research itself is going to be one of the biggest choices of career options and great opportunities for employability. And also the fact that you were able to understand the need to make your presence felt. So it was almost like a 360. Now, in an environment like that, I mean, whatever you do may not be enough because the level of uncertainty is so high, and we're dealing with a historic situation. So where do you think that you still have, some way to go? Because in my conversation with several leaders like yourself, the two things that came as big impediments. The first definitely was the training of teachers. And the second was to try and systemize an online functioning where digital infrastructure seems to be falling prey.
As far as higher education is concerned, I do not think that teachers need training. Most of them are MBAs and PhDs, and they have used these online databases and they have already have the access to it. What I sincerely believe is the regulatory framework and the availability of digital infrastructure in the country. There is no dearth of people. There is no dearth of people who are, capable or willing to work. What we lack in this country is infrastructure, and this is the same problem as you have in agriculture or manufacturing. There is no dearth of engineers. There is no dearth of trained manpower. What lacks is the logistical support to the manufacturing companies. In education sector, the problem is that the policy making is very, very myopic. Let me tell you, I've always said the new national education policy, and I've been seconded by this by the highest of the bureaucrats who are part of the system. The new education policy was formulated without keeping teachers as part of the committee. Tell me one single teacher who has been teaching, who has been part of the new education policy framework draft with Mr. Kasturirangan. Now, the problem is that you need to understand as to what goes on behind a teaching system, what goes on behind a higher education system. Like, for example, my institution is a 30-year-old institution where we offer courses at the postgraduate level. Our teachers are technically savvy, they are trained, our students are technically savvy. Our students have technical background. What they often miss is their connect with the industry. Now, what is really required is an enabling framework from the government side which allows us to seamlessly connect with the industry. The education policy often talks about everything in terms of an input mode. Even the new education policy, which is in paper talking about an output orientation, but in fact, let me tell you, the devil lies in the details. The devil lies in the regulatory structure which will come out of it. You will have to probably bring about a new act in the parliament, which will replace these existing regulatory bodies like UGC and AICTE into a new kind of a framework where they are talking about a unified higher education regulator. So, the problem of this country is not really the people. It is the governance structures, and it is the regulatory frameworks, and it is those who frame our policies.
It's interesting that you mentioned that the new education policy seems myopic, and this is contrary to a lot of opinion which thinks it's futuristic. But the common ground of what you mentioned was perhaps being impeded by deeper governance, deeper bottlenecks, more red tapeism, which will not enable the entire essence of the policy, to take shape. So there seems to be one is the disconnect in the thought, but the commonality lies in the inability to act the way that thought needs.
What we've been doing in this country is that, we really are trying to achieve too much in too little a time. And every time we do that, we fail, and then we try to bring it a new policy. In education in 1986, when you got the education policy, it created an HRD ministry out of an education ministry. In 2020, a policy has brought back the same idea. It has now converted the HRD ministry into education ministry. Why am I able to find flaws in a policy? Why? Because probably among my peer directors of different business schools and institutions, I also hold a vice chancellorial equivalent, position. Now the point is, I am the only one who is fresh out of teaching. Most vice chancellors and directors of the institutions, they ask them when did they teach their class last. So if vice chancellors are disconnected from the classrooms, they would not be able to tell you what is wrong with the systems. So you can't really expect a bureaucrat to understand what goes in the classroom and what is required by a teacher. You can't understand. They have created a policy which is very good on paper. But as I said, we need to now work very hard to build the regulations.
We cannot move forward without good policies and good governance. The fact of the matter remains that despite all the policies that we have, for all that you mentioned, manufacturing, financial policies, lending policies, every single policy framework, there are always people who still manage to do well at some capacity. And that's perhaps should be the purpose of our conversation, is that because if we have to assume as entrepreneurs that we have to work despite governance, how do we do that? And I know you've been doing that very, very arduously at IMS. So talk us through that experience.
Post the independence, we need systems to excel. We are no longer fighting the British. Even if individuals do well, unless the system excels, you will create an unequal society. The latest data suggests that close to 95% of the Indians, close to 95% of the wealth in India is controlled by just 0.5% of Indians. This inequity actually has come in since 1980 onwards, and it has exacerbated post 1990 when you got a services sector led economy. Still, let me tell you, there are very good things, very good examples of people who have done very well. But let me tell you, the state has always been an enabling factor when people have done well. Whether it is the Reliance Group, whether it is the Adanis, whether it is the Tatas, whether it is the Birlas, every time you look at individual businessmen and individual institutions prospering, there has been an enabling state behind it. You look at the IITs and IIMs. All the old IITs, the 3 of them and 3 IIMs were set up, 5 IITs and 3 IIMs, they were set up in collaboration with foreign institutions. So they did well at a time when the state was very supportive of education systems. They did, when the Prime Minister Nehru's idea of import substitution really was working, he was going out of the way to support companies to function. And of course, there was a license permit Raj. But yes, several of the large entrepreneurs did very, very well. I can tell you, Aditya Vikram Birla, I'm a big fan of his. In just 25 years of his work life, he was 25 when he joined his grandfather's business, took over the mantle. By the age of 60, he had around 30 projects running. We have a large number of people who are doing very well individually, but we have to ensure that the system together does well. For example, Ashok Soota. Ashok Soota moved out of Wipro and created his own company, right? Mindtree.
Sure.
In 2011, he created another company after leaving Mindtree, Happiest Mind. Yesterday, his IPO has been oversubscribed 150 times, right? So if you look at these individual stories, they are made up of grit and vision. But when you move up to a point, your grit and vision can take you only up to a point. Beyond that, the state and its policies take over. So, for example, today's infrastructure says that as an AICT institution, if I've got NBA accreditation, I've got freedom to interact with everyone, and I've got freedom to keep my curriculum intact. I can create my curriculum. So we need more freedom in that direction. We need more freedom to operate with the industry. We need more freedom to run program for the industry. We need more freedom in terms of our human resource policies. We need more freedom in terms of course, the...
Well, the argument to all this is going to be, Professor Pandey, that who's stopping you? But I know exactly where you're coming from. So, obviously, you have reservations with the policy, which is absolutely respected. And it's always important to critique. In fact, an integral part of our new education policy does encourage critical thinking like your own. So tell us 3 things that if you could change in the education policy, what would those 3 things be and why?
Well, I think the first thing in the idea is that the education policy is very, very clear that it is talking about making India a global player, and they are now talking about a 4-year degree program. Now, one of the major issues with this idea is that it is easy to talk about engineering programs to be converted to a 4-year program. It is very difficult on existing curriculum basis to create our undergraduate BCom and BA humanities and commerce programs into 4-year programs. So they have to re-look into it. Probably students would be wasting 1 more year in studying what is not required at all. Our education system is an examination-based system where students actually use guidebooks, the reality which the vice chancellors probably do not know and probably ignore. The reality is that across the country, people use guidebooks to pass exams. Unless you bring about a huge curriculum change. So my suggestion to government is, before converting all the courses to a 4-year program, which will be akin to wasting 1 more year, the student can do something else. Now, another of the idea is allowing foreign universities to operate in India. This is a very ticklish point. You can't really allow and make a system where a country where bottom of the 70% of the country as the bottom of the pyramid. So if you allow foreign universities, you are making education a preserve of the elite. Do not make education a preserve of the elite. You will do a massive damage to the ethos and conscience of this country. And the land of Mahatma, the land of Chanakya, the land of Chanakya wrote Arthashastra and he was a poor man because he was allowed to study in places where no money was charged. Let me tell you, 1950 to till date, we have a socialist system where the state education is subsidized. So if state education systems are subsidized, what happens? The bottom of the pyramid has a take on it. So do not deny, foreign universities are welcome. But foreign universities, the moment they'll come, they'll create a new class of their own. And a country which is so deeply divided on class and caste lines, we love rankings, we love people, so everybody will recruit only from these foreign universities and their campuses. Nobody would come to those state university campuses.
Isn't that a bit of a defensive approach, Professor Pandey? Look at the current situation. I mean, you anyway have students going overseas, right? And when they want to come back, they anyway will have that stamp, and they could be matters of choice. If the overseas universities come here, A, chances are that the education cost will be lesser. B, they will integrate with universities like their own and bring about joint courses, which will be very welcome, make it more relevant, right? And we'll get that. So, and secondly, that's one part of it, right? One part of the thinking. And the other part of the thinking is it necessary to educate yourself and to be a very exceptional man to remain poor? Why should we also laud poverty? That's the other way of thinking at it. We've taken some great numbers. I'm just saying these are counterpoints which we must consider.
The problem of our country is that the moment you open up our education system, it is only American universities which will come and set up shops. American system is a Shylockian system where, let me tell you what is happening in US.
No, but why would you say that? Why can't other universities come? There is no restriction.
Because education mostly is a private business in US. In most European systems, the state backs the education system. In America, it is very difficult to take education if you don't have money. It requires a lot of money and it's a money minting business. American system runs after rankings and they are the first ones to actually promote ranking. India is copying that American system of ranking, which is not a right approach. So, what happens when you talk about Indian ethos, Indian systems, you have to allow Indian education system to learn from the best. That's why in 1970s and 60s, we invited American institutions to partner with Indian institutions to make them better. My suggestion is, instead of inviting them to set up shops here, ask them to come and partner with Indian institutions. Let me tell you, in the last policy, you were not even allowed to offer joint degrees. You straight away are talking about foreign universities coming and set up shops here. What I'm saying is, allow foreign universities to first issue twinning programs with Indian universities and allow them to grow together.
That there is obviously a meeting ground, because if you're building a self-reliant India, it has to be inclusive, no doubt about that. But you need overseas participation as well, because
Yes.
at the end of it all, we're an enormous market, and we need to leverage
Let me
visibility.
tell you, the foreign universities will come and they'll take a place because they've got money. Let me tell you, you're talking about inviting companies, universities from a $23 trillion economy, which does not have enough students. That's why they invite students from worldwide into their campuses. And now, when they come closer to us, they'll try to capture our market. Let me tell you, it'll be death knell for the large state-run education system of the universities. I want the state to have its role in education.
That may be a better way of the overseas universities coming down out here, rather than our students going out and then we have a complaint of the brain drain from this country. Maybe that's an option, but your points are well taken. You talked about ranking and how debilitating it is. I couldn't agree more with that, particularly if we don't have a credible ranking system. And more so at a time when we're trying to eradicate the system of marks as a benchmark and we're building grades. This ranking with numbers, is counterproductive. But yes, that having been said, it's very important to have standards set. And that kind of benchmarking, because at some level, a student needs to understand his ability to choose. If he doesn't have a mechanism to do that, that itself is also a failing in the system. So there has to be an alternate created. It's all very well to criticize a current way of working, but we need to build a parallel option, because that's solution-led thinking.
No, I think as far as ranking goes, let me tell you, my ideas on ranking are very, very clear. It all depends who ranks and how do you rank them.
Exactly, the credibility.
Let me punch 200 holes in the National Institutional Ranking Framework.
Right.
You created 100 institutions. You put private universities into it. You put a small standalone institute like mine into it. I have got 360 student intake, for example. A private university has 3,000 intake. They show a balance sheet of 100 crores. I show a balance sheet of 30 crores. They say that university is better than mine. Right? These are not the right approaches. You are throwing the baby out with bathwater. When you do ranking like this, you do not give an objective criteria, you confuse. And that is why all the press, all the media has come up with their rankings. They go to institutions, they ask for money in terms of advertisements, and they rank them better.
And that's exactly why I use the word credibility.
Credibility. There is no credibility left of the government after this National Institutional Ranking Framework. Why? Because you ranked private universities over national institutes of technology. How come is it possible that I would send my child into a private university rather than sending my child to a national institute of technology which has better faculty, better systems? I am very much in favor of the new education policy talking about accreditation.
Right.
No, you must say accreditation is a must, and I'm also very much in favor of this disaffiliation. We do not want affiliated system to work. What we want is that every institution must get an accreditation which is done very frankly and objectively. So accreditation is a better idea. Let me tell you, let everybody get accredited rather than rank. Don't create a Brahminical order, and that creates a problem in the minds of the people. Like, for example, after so many rankings, I have come to a conclusion that when you get ranked, students have stopped looking at those rankings.
That's exactly when I talked about credibility. It is actually representing everything that you said. Because the moment you discredit the ranking, and that the entire ethos of it gets diluted.
We need to create a system where education is for all. Every capable person in this country is able to study. I am not in favor of everyone going for higher education. Let us look at the brilliant people who are academically oriented to go for higher education, but other people also must get enough skills. And that is the best part of the new education policy, that for the first time, it is talking about skill building. The devil once again lies in details as to what policies they frame. So we will get a system where people who are not academically, who do not have an academic bent of mind, would go for a skill-oriented program. and they'll be able to make a living. Now, the current crisis of unemployment can be tackled only through education and skill building, and that is where I give 5 points out of 5 to this national education policy.
As a leader, what would you advise for sections of our education ecosphere who are right now going through troubled times? A, your fellow Vice Chancellor. B, parent. C, the teacher. And 4, the student.
To the Vice Chancellors, my request would be, please go to the classroom. And please start doing academic works once again. Mere administration makes, all the administrative duties to all the great Vice Chancellors of this country have made them a bit myopic. I request everyone to go back to the classroom and start teaching and see how much the student has changed since you were a professor. To the parents, allow your children to go to colleges and schools. Allow them to learn in the hybrid models. One day they will be in the school, the other day they'll be in the studying at home. Don't insist on keeping your children at home. You will do a lot of damage to them and the economy. The economy will shut down forever just because you love your children too much. It's a disease with just 1% of mortality rate. Young people would actually not get affected. Teach them how to take care of themselves. As parents, you will not be around for your children throughout your life. Bring back the old normal along with this new normal. To the students, my idea is read a lot. Use this time. Use this era. Let me tell you, you are talking about an era where technology is changing every day. There's so much of change in terms of systems just because technology changes. From online learning teaching, which you are now seeing, you also have e-governance systems. You've got banking systems which have been turned online. Learn how to keep yourself safe using technology. My students, exercise, eat nutritious food, and ensure that you're able to maintain your immunity by taking as much as probiotics as much as possible. Because they say against a virus, the best defense is a probiotic food. So if you have a healthy gut, you have a healthy body and you have a healthy mind. Now the teachers, first of all, hats off to all my teachers. They were the silent corona warriors. They led the nation. They allowed teaching to continue at school level, at college level. They were conducting exams online. They were evaluating question papers online. They were setting question papers for open book examinations, which is a very difficult task. My fellow teachers, my colleagues across the country, probably across the world, my one advice to you would be that please improve your skills. Your technical skills, your skills in your domain subject, and 3, do not plagiarize your work. So please, probably everybody has committed a mistake in the past. Now new systems have come in. Have a purpose in your life which you only can find, and try to teach your students also to find a purpose in their life. Stay positive. Staying positive does not mean that everything around you would be okay. Positive actually means that even if everything around you is not okay, you shall be okay. It's a very difficult life for teachers. We do not have the right policies for the HR policies for teachers across the country. We need to now have the new education policy also talking about the human resource policies in educational institutions, which is a missing point. And once that comes in, probably, I think we shall be doing the best, which is required for the teacher, giving them, the right working conditions.
Professor Alok Pandey, it's been thoroughly enlightening and engaging. I often end off with one single letter to encapsulate the conversation and to portray your leadership, which really becomes an easy takeaway for our students. So in your case, it's the letter F. You've been exceptionally frank. I respect you for that. You've been forthright and you've been forceful, which shows a sense of energy and commitment which you bring to the table. Then you've been flexible to be able to adjust as and when required, which is the hallmark of a great leader. And ultimately, you've been futuristic with your sense of positivity, progress, and purpose. That makes you a very wise chancellor. Thank you for talking to us on EduWith Doctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chetan Sharma, for inviting me here. Thank you very much. Edumate.tv, which started as a internet-based channel, is going to be a revolution over a period of time. What I felt that in times when social media is the most sought after by every citizen of this nation and access to internet is rising, this innovation by Mr. Chetan Sharma has given a lot to people. Probably we need to understand this medium a little more. Probably as time passes by, people would understand its utility more. And I hope that over a period of time, this would stand out as one of the most significant innovation in the history of not just education, but also in terms of how media can be used to benefit education and educators. Thank you, Mr. Chetan Sharma, for this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.